It's James Steinhubel with TVU, and I'm on the music channel, and I've got Doug Nance with us today, a voice over talent and live announcer. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? I mean, it's kind of a weird environment we're in these days. Kind of, hello from afar.
You know what? I've been running TVU for a year, and I like being valuable and important. So this has been very, very good for TVU. We've been providing public service interviews, and we've gained access to some of the most interesting and high-powered people on both sides in the business world. So it's good. And like yourself,
Well,
when
no,
you,
don't worry about that. I'm not a high-powered individual or
mm,
highly influential,
but very
that kind of
interesting,
thing.
very interesting.
Interesting, perhaps. It's kind of odd, maybe. Odd might be the way to put it. Not too many people do what I do. You
Right.
know.
And and you've been doing this for how long?
Oh man, in terms of the voiceover thing and live announcing is essentially the work that I do, and I've been doing that well since 1979. I went on the radio, but I've been a live announcer since I was even younger than that. With doing various events, and so I started out as an actor, as a kid. So it kind of evolved into this weird thing, and I've been doing this, but I will also point out it's like so many of us in the arts business. I was an and for a long time. I was a voice actor and a live announcer and a salesperson or and a disc jockey. So it's the nature of the beast, but it's this weird thing that's kind of been a part of my life for like 30 something years. So
And so you're all set up. Like your business is basically at your fingertips with your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop, your computer, your sound system. You've been set up, in your business for decades in this
well,
location.
not so much in this location. I would suggest to you that, I mean, for the longest time to perform voiceover work, you had to go to studios. And in a place like Calgary, for example, there isn't that many studios. There wasn't that much production being done at that time.
Hmm.
So in order to be a voiceover talent, you really had to do something else. It was kind of like being an actor in a lot of cases. You were kind of between gigs a lot. So the internet, really the high speed internet really changed everything because you were suddenly able to move audio files that were broadcast quality to anywhere in the world. So I was kind of fortunate that I'd been around for a long time and kind of had a background in being, a salesperson or whatever and working with business people. So I just began to reach out to them very early on and had a home studio that really started in a closet with a bunch of foam on the wall. And now you can see the booth behind me that I use today. It's a little different.
Yeah, it's awesome, and it's you're you were like so prepared for the COVID experience. Like your business, it's basically passing by. You know what I mean? And everyone else is getting days off. You're probably just working like crazy.
Well, I would say a couple of things on that. One is that the isolation of voiceover when you do it, what I do, which is work in my house by myself every day and talk to myself. That's a strange living, as it is, and you're really by yourself all day long. So you learn to work around that, and I've done that for a long time. Um, so it wasn't a big shift for me with the whole self-isolation thing and all that sort of thing. The biggest change that I think happened was the way the work went. You had kind of fits and starts of things where, for example, when I was doing doing radio imaging, and they would be requiring stuff right away because of the whole the way that thing was unfolding. I found that retail went through a period of didn't know what to do, kind of business as usual, then kind of a shutdown, and then a whole bunch of really kind of heartfelt kind of things. And these days, like as in today, because it simply changes day by day, it's kind of a brighter, more hopeful sense that I'm getting from the copy. And all of these things are happening so fast. So for me, this is kind of a business as usual, and yet the work itself, the copy itself, and the reads, the way you're delivering the copy has changed and changes minute by minute.
Interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. So I'm going to go to dougdenance.com,
Right.
and I love the way your website's put together. It's very simple. You've got several different demos that people can listen to. You can download the demos. and
That's right.
you
There's
got
a
all
lot of
these.
different genres in voiceover, where people think of voiceover as just, for example, the one that I often get, when people say, well, what do you do? And I say, well, a guy who, when you saw a movie back in the day and he went, in a world, I kind of do that stuff. But I do a lot. That's really not true. But there's a lot of different things that you do. There's, the commercial kind of world. And then within that, there's genres themselves, like the automotive business. And the automotive business at a national level, such as saying, Matthew McConaughey in a Lincoln commercial, is significantly different than that Lincoln dealer in Seattle, Washington, let's say. So, the kinds of work that you do are really kind of broken up by different types of genres. And that's what those demos reflect on the website.
No, it's good that you can, because it's mindset, in all art too. You know what I mean? And then to deliver it on time. I haven't pre-listened to this one, but everyone that I listened to is fantastic. I'm gonna put
Thank
this.
you.
I'm gonna put this news one on. So just stand by here.
History. A historic event is heard here every day. To be really historic, depend on us to do our job. We have to do a great job. Talk Radio 630 KHOW.
It's
That's just
awesome
the
that.
stuff that goes in between the news, when you
Yeah,
hear the
yeah.
story and then the stuff that somebody's got to do it, right? And
It's
but I
more than
think
the
that the
voice.
thing,
You've got the sound in the background. You've got music. You've got
well, I
you've got
wish I had
tempo.
all
You've
the
got tempo,
talents.
meter, timbre. You're messing with people, man. You've got some good
Well,
stuff
I
in
think
there.
the main thing that you're trying to do, I think, is to make sure that you're kind of the glue and the grease that fits between a lot of things with that. Whereas when you're doing, say, commercials or explainer videos, with people who are, here's how you do something like this, like that, and you're recording that with, say, animation or something along that line that are showing how these things are fitting together. The style and delivery are so much different, as you can imagine, because there it's kind of the exciting news thing is coming, and here it might be, hey James, here's how this fits into this and fits into that. So I think that the genres in some ways kind of represent the different ways that we interact with each other. Sometimes we're big and boisterous, sometimes we're quiet, sometimes we're thoughtful, but really at the end of the day, it's the way that we tell stories. So I think that that's really what those genres kind of represent.
And certainly, um, you're very knowledgeable. You're very wise. You have a very strong, intuitive flow, and people can learn that. But do you come? What kind of education or experience background? Like, where do you come from?
Well, when I was a kid, my parents were figure skaters, so I was around the arts, and my grandmother was a portrait painter. So I was around the arts a lot when I was younger, and I did a bunch of acting and actually could sing then before my voice changed. And I was tall when I was young, so that I tended to get cast a lot into lead roles in plays, and that kind of went away when my voice changed. But I kind of stayed into it and was involved in it. My grandfather was the announcer at Maple Leaf Gardens for a long time, and so I was kind of involved with it in that way. And in junior high school, I was selected, I guess, to be in a special 3-year program through junior high school that was an audiovisual program. This was back when you used to carry a VHS camera on your shoulder like this, and there was none of the things that you see today. Everything was edited on tape back then, if you can imagine. So, and from that, I kind of fell into that kind of world. So I was doing a bunch of that stuff, and being cast into various things with just kind of stumbling around. So I'd originally thought to be an artist like my grandmother, and I failed the entrance exam to the Alberta College of Art. So, it was kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? So my father said to me something, it was very, very kind. And of course, I was kind of a dumb guy at the time. He said, well, you can go anywhere in the world and take anything you want, in terms of education. So I became a disc jockey, figure that one out, right? I probably could have earned more money on unemployment than I could have being on air, but I had a great time on air, and I discovered voiceover that it was actually a thing at that time. So I remember thinking that, well, how do you do that? And of course, voiceover didn't really exist outside of places that were studio based, such as Los Angeles and New York and Chicago and Toronto and so on. So I kind of just stumbled around, and as studios grew up, I kind of went in, and I didn't even have a demo for a long time, but I just knew guys. And then the other side of the, sort of the and side for me was I was also doing live events. So I was announcing things like motocross racing and so on. And that led into things like freestyle motocross and into things like monster trucks and all of this kind of theatrical types of what they call motorsports entertainment. And again, that's been a part of my career for a long time, which again leads to, oh, well, hey, you're announcing the show. Why don't you voice the commercial? And away it went. So it kind of went like that. But the real change where it became a full-time gig and a viable business was when the internet came along, so that you could market yourself to people around the world, literally. So the majority of my work still comes from Canada and the United States, but I do a work, in France and in Germany and Ukraine and so on and so forth, through clients who hear me and we reach out, we end up working together. And what's funny is it still comes down to the same thing we're doing, James. Two guys talking to each other and creating something together. And I think that still transcends all aspects. It just gives me a lot more people with the opportunity to do that.
Now, so you have to be constantly fed with, a fresh, creative, balanced, cleared out starting point when you're creating this kind of art every day. What kind of art do you consume? What history, literature, music, paint, sculpture. What do you consume art wise to have yourself to be creating art every day?
Well, and that's a really good point, because you can easily, with the isolation that we're all experiencing now, but that voiceover people can relate to, is you can easily just get inside your head, and that way you end up really not changing or doing anything new. So the number one thing that I try to do is to go out and see people, like to make sure that I go out and have a conversation with somebody. It doesn't have to be an in-depth conversation, but just out talking to people and hearing what's going on and hearing what they're talking about. Which may be a great excuse to spend a lot of time in bars. No, I'm kidding. But another part of that is really, I love music. I'm an audio kind of guy, as you can imagine. So music to me is the purest kind of way that I can enjoy art, because I have no skill at it at all. I have all the ego to be a talent, but no skill. So I go and watch those guys, and it's like watching alchemy, when I see live music. So I get the best of both worlds by consuming or supporting live music and hanging out with people. As you can imagine today, both of those things are tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to be able to do. So I'm finding that what we're doing right now, we're sitting here having this kind of a conversation that's as live as we could do it and as close as we could be.
Yep.
But you're still getting that kind of, hey, there's another person on the other end of that line. What's up with you? That sort of thing.
I've been dancing around it, and I'm just going to go right to it. You're very, very sharp. You got a very, very keen mind. You're very creative. What kind of books do you read? What kind of ideas do you absorb? Like, where are you at with that?
Well, and it's funny you would say that, because one of the things that I am a big book proponent, but I tend to read nonfiction mostly.
Okay.
And the reason is simply that I don't read that well. And I know that sounds so funny coming from a voice talent, but I suffer from dyslexia. Now, not a great deal, but enough to have to work at reading. So what I tend to do is I tend to read the kind of things, if you will, that kind of represent the way that I work. So I don't tend to read great lengthy things. I'm not an audiobook talent. I don't read great lengthy e-training or e-learning things. My things tend to be shorter commercials or short videos. So of course I tend to consume a lot of magazine type stuff. And I like to have some that I read. So for example, around music or around the voiceover business or whatever else it is, or around business itself. But then I like the idea of what the internet can do with things like Flipboard, where you can curate from the internet things that I may never read. And so I find those to be, because again, that's kind of my life, where I get a lot of things that I don't know much about. So I try to have that curiosity in that sort of short form, if you will. So tend to be kind of a short form magazine-y kind of reader rather than a lengthy book guy.
Which is an art form in itself now. It's trying to find there used to be so many great magazines.
No kidding.
And
No
now,
kidding.
you know, they would even make you feel a certain way when you walked in. You know, so now it's tough.
Well, I still am one of these guys, and maybe it's, I worked in the industry, of course, but I still like to read a newspaper. And I mean, actually, the physical paper. I do read a lot of news and various things online, on tablets or on computer screens and so on. But I still find the newspaper is one of those things where I really can sit down and concentrate on it. And it's the first thing in the day. So I'm kind of hopefully at my sharpest then. So to me, that, that studying the newspaper and reading through and making sure I understand is still one of those things that's like, and maybe it's because it always was, but it's like a practice for me, to be able to sight read things that are of, a little bit higher education, that are not just, kind of dumb things or just internet stuff that's generic, but making me work a little bit to look at words or concepts that I don't normally see or think about. And that I think is what I think that I try to do, is to use that kind of thing to cause me to think about things in ways I don't always think about them.
It's interesting, so from an artist who knows how to shape words and the sound of words and the speed of words, and a successful business person who's found a way to do business that now everybody has to now try to figure out. And as an individual who's, discovered a way to be grounded and to connect to the stream of creativity, what what words can you share with our viewers that would be meaningful and helpful at this time?
Well, I think one of them is to be sensitive. Sensitive, and I mean sensitive on all levels, not just in the sense of empathy, but in the sense of really checking in with people and being sensitive to what's going on, for two reasons. I think one, it's much harder to have those touch type relationships when you can't do that. When I stand in front of you, there's an aura, and I know that sounds a little, arty farty, but there's an aura that you project, a confidence or a fear. You know how around some people make the hair on your neck stand up and so on. So I think that the notion is we need to be very sensitive to people and to really listen to them, because in a lot of ways, and I listen to them whole body, with their face as well as their words, because we're so distant from each other right now. And so I find that one of the things I've been encouraging people to do when they're on Zoom meetings or whatever, and there's a group of people, is act like you were in the room. So you wouldn't be turning your back and starting to work on something if you were in the room. And I think the other thing is to react to people. I mean, this is something that's a secret of anybody who does voice acting, is the facial expressions and the actions that come with that help to bring out that emotional sound that you only receive from your ears. So some of us, in the voiceover business, I guess, have had a bit more work that way, but this notion of being sensitive. And the other level of being sensitive is the sensitivity to what's going on around you, not only within your city or your own area, but, your province, the world, and so on, and being sensitive to what is happening in different places to different people. Again, because I work internationally, it's a different world, or it was a significantly different world, say in Germany 2 weeks ago, than it is today. That I corresponded back and forth with the studio there earlier today to do some work, and she was saying, hey, they're starting to lift some of the restrictions, or in Denmark, where they're starting to see some kids go back to school. You want to be sensitive to that. If that was you and you were calling us and our kids are at home climbing the walls or whatever else it is, you need to be sensitive to what's going on around you. So I think that notion of that maybe is a good thing for everybody to do anyway. But I think if I was picking a word today, it would have to be sensitive to the people that you know and love and that you care about. And that really should include all of us, I guess, today.
Doug the Nance, voiceover talent, live announcer with me, James Steinable, on TV, the music channel. Thank you so kindly, sir, and we'll check in with you next time. Have a great day.
Well, we've got to at least end it like this, don't you think, James? You're watching TVU.
Thank you.